Hi, everyone. Welcome back to CARRM's Profiles podcast. My name's Sugamiya.
My name is Kanishka, and we're so excited to introduce Taylor, and we're going to interview her for today's episode.
Hi, thank you so much for having me today. I'm Taylor Dupuis Shalovsky, originally from Sagamok and Anishinaabe First Nations in Massey, Ontario. But I grew up in Newmarket, Ontario, just north of the GTA. I spent my whole life there, actually. I actually went to York University, got a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology. Kind of didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life before medical school. In high school, I actually dropped out of the science stream, thought that science wasn't it for me. And then about halfway through my undergrad degree, I was like, okay, well, I'm actually interested in neuroscience, and I like neuro, and I was focusing on that side in psychology, and then actually went back to high school, did night school with a bunch of people who had failed their high school courses. It was a unique experience itself, and was able to then take the science prerequisite courses to write my MCAT in my third year of my undergrad. Applied to medical school through the Indigenous Admissions Pathway and luckily got in. And I've been here at Western doing my MD for the past 4 years now. Like, tomorrow's my last day of my MD. So
You must be so excited.
I'm so excited. I'm ready to be moving on to the next.
Your experience actually is so unique. I think that it lets other people know that, like, you don't have to be interested in sciences, like, right off the get-go. You can, like, learn, like, what you like, and you just, like, I'm, like, actually really glad that, you know, you got to, like, discover sciences later and, like, follow your passion. I think it lets more people know that you don't have to.
Well, that's what before we started, I actually said, you know, I really think it's best if you do the things that you're interested in. Mm-hmm. Like, I knew I was interested in psychology when I was in high school, and I thought I was really bad at math and science and was like, I shouldn't do that then. But then just started following things that I was interested in, and that meant when I was time to apply to medical school, I had this super high GPA because I was just loving all of my courses and really loving learning. And I think that that's the most important part when you're coming in, is to do something that you're really interested in. And if that pathway is going to be medicine, then it'll lead you there no matter what.
Yeah. Especially, like, I think it's quite interesting and also, like, very refreshing to hear that you did a Bachelor's of Arts degree for your undergrad. I feel like a lot of people who aspire to be doctors, like, they feel like they're stuck doing, like, a biology degree or something in the sciences, mainly, if they want a shot at doing medicine. And I think, like, I really like your point of, you know, exploring all your options and exploring different things to figure out what you like to learn. Because at the end of the day, that's where you're going to do the best at, right?
I really feel like the best, like, applicants that we have are normally art students and people who, like, know how to talk to people. At the end of the day, that's medicine's and art. And
So we just want to dive into, like, some, like, insights on, like, the structure of, like, Western's, like, medicine program, and, like, how it, like, if you have any knowledge on, like, other postgraduate programs and how that kind of differs from each other, as well as, like, the general program, like, itself.
Yeah. So I think Western's changing this year to be that you can apply after your third year of your undergrad. There's a couple other programs in the country that allow you to apply in after your third year as well. So if it's something you're interested in, you can obviously fast track yourself. Or if you're like me and you're just kind of along for the ride, then you do your 4 years and then come in. The MD program itself, admissions wise, like, they're all online. So you can pull up all of the different admissions requirements across the country. They're generally, you know, you have to have a 4 year or 3 year of an undergrad done. You have to have a certain GPA, and you have to have a certain MCAT score. And the MCAT is the medical college assessment test or admissions test. It is just essentially an opportunity for you to practice sitting a long test. Really, in reality, it doesn't have anything to do with what you do in medical school once you get in, but it's that little barrier step where you have to show, I could sit for 6 to 8 hours and write an exam and do somewhat well under pressure, but it's not necessarily all that it's cracked out to be. Like, I feel like a lot of people put a lot of pressure on it. The other component of your admissions application is your autobiographical sketch at Western. So it's like your opportunity to showcase the things that you do well and parts of your personality that would make you a good physician, which we can get into those pieces. I think the difference here, and I don't know very much about other grad programs, I know that the dental program, they write a DAT instead of an MCAT. They have similar admissions requirements. I'm not sure about the sketch-wise, like about their written sketches. And as for master's and PhD programs, I'm not sure how involved that application process.
So I was thinking, like, how important would you say your GPA is in, like, the grand scheme of everything?
I think it depends on where you're applying to and, like, what pathways you're applying through. Like, for me, as someone who sat on the Indigenous Admissions Pathway for the past 4 years, our pathway, the whole basis of it is that we do a holistic review. So if someone doesn't have a strong GPA, it's something that we can say, okay, well, their MCAT's really good. So we know they can study, we know they can learn. Like, we don't necessarily, and we can look at other explanations too, right? If somebody's like, my GPA is low because I had a really bad year, as you can see on my transcript, like my mom got sick or something like that. And we can actually take that into consideration when we're bringing on applicants versus other programs where they have a higher number of applicants. Like, I know Queen's now is doing this lottery system where if you meet the minimums, you just get entered into the lottery in order to get your name pulled. See if you get an interview basically after that. Yeah. Really interesting. So like, those programs would be more important to hit those minimum requirements versus like a pathway application where you could be a bit more of a holistic applicant.
Good to know, because like, I know like at U of T's med school, their GPA is like basically dictates how like far you get into your application process. And I know like it's like a lot of people are really stressed about that, and it's good to know that like Western also has like, it's taking into other like considerations, like other things that are like not necessarily
you a good applicant, more than just your grade.
For sure. I think that there's a lot, like that's the way that the world is kind of going with all the medical schools popping up. Like PMU, I know is a lot more focused on like who you are rather than like what your grades are, which I think is really what makes a good doctor, is who you are. Sure. And I think the new medical school at York University that's going to be coming out, I think it's 2029 or something. Yeah. I'm on the advisory committee for them for the creation of their pathways. And that's a lot of the conversation that's been happening around it, is making sure that we're being holistic in our application process. Yeah, and I feel like we're starting to move in that right direction of like looking at applicants holistically. It's so time consuming that it's hard to convince schools to be like, look, like I know that the GPA isn't great here, but like let's look at her story. Let's talk about her story, So it's a slow process, but it's happening.
Yeah. I mean, like you mentioned how you're on like these advisory committees involving like admission, especially Indigenous pathways. Could you maybe talk more about this role? As far as like before meeting you and getting in contact with you, I never knew that this was a pathway. So maybe like elaborate more on your role and also what inspired you to get involved in this way.
So there's lots of pathways at Western, and I know there's pathways across the country too. The Indigenous pathway in particular is one that I've been fortunate enough to be involved in the past 4 years. It started for me because I came in through the Indigenous Admissions Pathway, so they reached out to me and asked if I would like to be involved in file review for our candidates coming in. So I came in my first year and did kind of that, and then I saw the way things were running, and I knew that there's ways that we could make it better. So I started to take on research projects, just looking at like how the pathway works, how we can do more, how we can make sure we're being more holistic in our applicants. And then that led into me taking on like a more leadership research role, interviewing our applicants, doing our file review, and then ended up making an Indigenous student group in this past year where we all come into and enter into after you go into the pathway. So it's like an automatic entrance into a student union. So like that's where the role has been for me so far. In regards to the other pathways, like I know there's an access pathway and like a Southwestern Ontario pathway. So like if you have unique life circumstances, if you have been in under any kind of situation, so like, I guess unique circumstances is really the word to say, then you could apply through those pathways and be looked at more holistically, which I really appreciate in admissions, because I think we've had there's been such a hard line drawn with our GPA and our MCAT scores, and there's so many beautiful research papers that are out that are saying those have nothing to do with what makes a good doctor. Like, sure, they correlate with success in your first 2 years, which are entirely textbook. Right. And then after that point, they don't correlate with any success. So why are we still using that as our markers for bringing in applicants? I couldn't tell you. So that's really what I've been focusing on in the admissions pathway, and trying to get these people to be more holistic in that way.
I think a lot of people, I think like first years that are like just getting into like understanding like what's like the applications process. Could you like kind of elaborate like what like the general timeline would be? Like I know some people want to finish like year 3 and then immediately like write the MCAT that summer, and then they want to jump into like September of year 4. I think they start applying for like schools in like medicine, but like I don't know, like how does the like medical like timeline work? Like once you submit your applications, like what goes on the background?
So I guess for context, like when you're applying to medical school, OMSAS is where you go through in Ontario. It's the Ontario Medical Admission Service. So you put all of your applications to each medical school through there. You pay money into the void through there, and then your application gets sent off, and you guys don't really know what happens after that. So normally what happens is we receive all the applications, and we, on the Indigenous Admissions Pathway side, start reviewing in around November area. It's where you just essentially look through, you grade people based on what their application is. You read their autobiographical sketch, you get to know a good sense of the candidate, and then you kind of come with your hat on like who you think would make a good candidate to interview, and then you essentially duke it out. So in January we have a big meeting, we all sit around a table. Normally everyone has like a candidate that they're like really rooting for, and you're just like fighting, trying to get them to get an interview and like really advocating for them, especially if their story really resonated with you, or everyone's on the same page and like, yeah, that candidate's fantastic, absolutely, we'll bring them in for an interview. And then that's normally around when the interview invites go out. Interviews happen in March and February area for Western, and that's where we would be like a full day of interviews, back-to-back students. It's a long day, but it's so great to see so many like young, interested people, and they're super passionate always, so it's always like a very rewarding day, but it is a long day. And then after that we again sit down at the table and duke it out another time. And then send out our acceptances. I think Western does the first Tuesday of May.
So for the interviews, like what would you be looking for, like characteristic of like a good like interviewee? Like
I think it's a good question. Like for me, I know like I think it really stands out when a candidate has prepared but hasn't over prepared. So like if you're getting asked a question that throws you and you're like, I've never practiced this before, but you've practiced enough interview style questions that you can kind of navigate and catch yourself, I think that really stands out. I think knowing yourself really stands out. So like if I'm asking you a question about like who you are as a person, and your answer is like, I don't know. And I'm like, I don't know about that.
Right.
So really knowing yourself is important, and just overall being like very friendly. If you're friendly, you're making eye contact, you're personable, that comes across. Even through Zoom, it comes across. And, if you're faking it, it also comes across.
Right.
And what we're looking for is those compassionate, hardworking people. Those are the best people in medicine, right? So really that's what we're hoping stands out, at least for me on my end when I'm on my route.
Yeah. Actually, when you said that you guys advocate for which applicant you think is the best candidate, that's actually surprising for us, because I don't know exactly what I imagined would happen to some like application, but definitely not that. I think
the one guy with the stamper.
Yeah, like everyone's like pass, fail, pass, fail.
It surprised me too when I sat through, and honestly, the first time I was sitting in that conversation, I was like, how did I make it? Right, these candidates are way better than me, and we're like arguing about this. It's an interesting conversation to be in.
Yeah. I mean, maybe even like going back to the application itself, like, is there any, like, what tips would you give to someone applying? Like, what do you want to see on that initial application?
I think I want, like, I guess for me, like, it's different because I hate the MCAT. Very clearly, I think that they don't correlate with success at all. But if, one of them is poor, there's an opportunity for you at the end of your autobiographical sketch, at least at Western, to like explain yourself. And if I'm like, your GPA is a 2.0, which happens. People come through like that all the time, and people get in like that. But if they don't explain it, then it's kind of like, okay, like I have to now make up excuses in my head, and that takes a lot of mental gymnastics. So like, I think if you have weak points in your application, explaining it. I think the other component is like having things that you're truly passionate for. Like there's so many people that come through and they're like, I was a medical assistant at XYZ clinic and shadowed this doctor, and I thought it was really cool. And it's like, well, that's nice, but like, were you passionate about the medicine? Like, what about it made you so passionate? I didn't shadow a single physician before I went to medical school. Probably should have, to get an idea of what the job was going to be, but I didn't, because it wasn't something that I was really interested in. I don't really like office medicine. I'm doing emergency medicine. I'm more of a hospitalist person.
Right.
So I was doing a lot of advanced medical first response. I was doing standard first aid instructing. Like those were my components of my application because it was something I was interested in. And then the other piece is like showing that you're hardworking, right? So like if a candidate has for the past 4 years of school been able to focus entirely on school, I look at that candidate and I go, well, that's a big privilege in order to do that. When I look at a candidate who's, had a reduced course load because they were working full time on top of their school, that candidate really stands out to me because they're a lot more, I guess, hardworking on paper is what it comes across as. And I think that's also a piece of it. Like some people think you need to have these things that really jump out. Like I went to Peru and I did medicine with X, Y, and Z, and it was so great. It's not necessarily the thing that makes or break a candidate in my eyes.
I think a lot of people look for these stereotypical roles, like going, like shadowing, volunteering. I mean, obviously that's very important. I would say like it gives you like experience, but I think like we also like try to like find those opportunities. Like first, like we like get into undergrad and you're like right off the bat, we should be like involved.
It's like crowd mentality, I think, since everyone, like, that's what's expected, or that's the stereotype.
Canada.
Yeah. So I've definitely seen it, like, being a first year, I've definitely seen it, like, this past year. So many people, like, in my own program, I'm in Med-Sci, and everyone's talking about what research they're going to do, cold emailing professors, joining the same clubs, like literally the same 5 clubs. And it's like, so it's quite interesting to see how, sometimes like following everyone else might not look too good on you at all.
And you're kind of with the crowd. Right? If you're doing something that you find interesting that like your other classmates don't. And like that actually ends up standing out a lot. And it's not as much as I hate the competition. Like are in these pre-med programs, I feel so bad, but I didn't come from a pre-med background. I didn't know it was a thing until like I was a medical student hearing about it. That is horrific.
The way they like structure the programs to knock out people, it's like it's very, very competitive. They want the best of the best to like stand at the end. It's like, but they are not really taking into like circumstances of students maybe going through, and there's like no leeway to work around certain program requirements and things like that in like undergrad. That kind of makes the entire process kind of ugly. But like it's really good to know that like there's like programs like Western that's looking past all of that.
Hopefully.
I think we can go like more into, like you said, you're just finishing up your last year of medical school.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. So could we go into maybe like what a typical day looked like for you this past year?
Oh my goodness, this past year. It's been a busy year. This past year for me, so 4th year, my program is a 4-year MD program. This is different than the 3-year MD programs. But for me in my 4th year, you start off on elective. You do 8 electives, which is 16 weeks of rotations, where you're essentially trying to be your absolute best and get reference letters. So you're just like going every single day, whether you're sick or whatever it is, because you just want to be the best that you possibly can. That was a little hard. And also having a new first day every 2 weeks is hard. Like you show up, you don't really know where you're going. Sometimes you're in a different center. Like I went to Ottawa for a bit. I went to Toronto for a bit. I was like, I had to pay to live there. Like it was a hectic 15 weeks. All in the background, you're writing like personal statements and like your CV in order to apply through CARRM, which is the Canadian Residency Matching Service, not your club. So you're applying through that. You finish your application around December, you get 2 weeks off, and at that point you're getting interviews across the country for residency programs. Your January to February area is just filled with interviews. It feels like you're on Zoom constantly. You have like Zoom headaches, your ring lights on, you're exhausted. And then after that, you go back to the classroom for 4 weeks, which is just such a weird experience when you've been in the hospital for the past year straight or year and a half straight. And you sit there and you kind of learn about things that like, you're like, why are we doing this session on this? And then other sessions are like how to manage your finances. And you're like, oh, great. I need to know that. I need to learn how to be an adult by July 1st. And then obviously match day happens and we all post online the videos for it.
Those are so cute. I love seeing them.
So you post that you've matched somewhere, or unfortunately you go unmatched and you have to go in for a second iteration, which does happen to a few candidates. But they normally do fairly well in Canada, and like there's normally a lot of positions. I think that we should have 100% match rate as medical school graduates, but that's besides the point. And then you kind of go back into the hospital. So right now I'm on like pediatric intensive care. So I work probably 8 to 5 every day. I got on early today. And then I'm just basically riding out. Tomorrow's my last day, and then I get a couple months off. for residency?
I think we've been like kind of focusing on like undergrads, but like now I think some of our like listeners who might be already like applied to like medical school and they already got their offers back, I think they'd also be like curious about like what to expect once like med school is kind of ending. And I think your insight's like really helpful because like we're hearing all about like another like match state.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
I think just like some people who are like listening might just know that, there's like another thing coming. Like once. Yeah.
It was a surprise for me. Like, I came from an arts program. I didn't really know what a match was. And everyone, like, first day of medical school, they were like, so the match. And I was like, what does that mean? I have to fight.
Yeah. So, you kind of mentioned how busy you've been this past year. Do you how do you think that compares to undergrad? Maybe not just your fourth year of medical school, but maybe like medical school as a whole, like all 4 years. How does that compare to your workload in undergrad?
I think, like, for me, I think medical school is a little bit less work than, this past year has been an intention. Like, and I think when you're working full time and studying on top of it, it becomes difficult. But for me, before medical school, I was volunteering and I was working full time and I was a full time undergrad student. So it was hectic. Like, I feel like I was up at 5 I was working as a lifeguard. So I opened the pool at 5 and then I was there until 7:30. Then I had to catch the train to school and I was at school from like normally 8 to 5. And then after that, I would close the pool. So I would go back to work from 6 to 10 p.m. normally and then do it all over again the next day. So it was exhausting. And like now in comparison, like working and like studying for an hour in the evenings is like really feels like nothing. But back then I think that was the hardest time. And especially because in your mind, you're competing.
Yeah.
Like to do so much, right?
Especially when you have like a goal set in your mind, like you kind of want to work harder and harder. And I think that like people stress, like it's a subconscious process. But like good to know that like the stress level is kind of mellowed down.
I think it gets better. If that helps.
For sure.
Yeah. What would you say like helped manage stress just in general? Like what activities you found that gave you?
Good question. I think it's stuff that you have to enjoy it. So for me, like I love working out. Like I was powerlifting for the past 5 years and now my joints hurt and I'm old. So I don't do it anymore. But like powerlifting was really great. We built a gym in our basement. We got a dog this past year actually. And so like going on hikes with him and like, those are things that I really enjoy. So I focus on doing those things in my time. But I feel like as long as you find the things that you like, one, something really cool to talk about in the application. Like if you come in and you're like, all I do is study and work, everyone's going to be like, okay, like, what else do you like to do for fun? And if you have something that you really enjoy and you're passionate about, it really comes across.
I mean, talking about like passions and interests, like, do you think that there is time to pursue other passions on the side? Or, like, for example, you've worked with the admissions committees and different groups like to support Indigenous applicants especially. Do you think like there is time to do that, and do you think that is like encouraged in medical school?
Absolutely. I think that there's definitely time. Like I think these past 4 years have been like some of the peaks of my life. I loved medical school. I got married in medical school. I know it's just so much fun, and you have some free time. Like people pretend like you don't have free time. You do have free time. I think sometimes for me, like I bite off a bit more than I can chew. So like have like way too many things going on because I just never want to say no to anything. That's something I have to get a little bit better at. But I do think that there is time to pursue all of those passions, and the things that you're really passionate about are the things that you prioritize your time for.
It's so nice to hear. Congrats on your marriage. That's so
Maybe some like general last words. Like, how do you think applicants could prepare for medical school? And not just like applying, but just like the entire process. Like, what are they signing up for? How do you think they could better prepare themselves for that?
That's a really good question. I don't know. Like, I think in regards to preparing for medical school, I think the best preparation that you can do is really learning who you are and like learning the things that you like and like the things that the kind of person you want to be. Like, like I think that those are the pieces that really matter before medical school to help you prepare. Because when I came into medical school, I knew that I liked to work out and that helped me clear my head. I knew that I wanted a dog and wanted to hike, I knew that I was going to marry my husband at the time, although he didn't know it then. And I knew that like my family was above all else important to me. And that's how I recharged my batteries. So I came into medical school with this huge support system of people who loved me and things that I did to protect my own mental health. And then that I feel like is what prepared me to be successful in medical school and then also successful hopefully in my future career because I have this baseline knowledge of things that make me well, you know?
Yeah, sure. Maybe like just one more like comment on like how you can, I don't know, like maybe how you balance like such like you balance both like your work life and your personal life and like advocacy and then also like adulting in general, just like finances, like living on your own. So it's such a like everything there's like so much going on, but like how do you think you like were able to like navigate all of that just like beyond like your support system? But do you think like there was also support from like medical schools and other like outside sources that were able to like guide you and would also help other people navigate that?
Yeah, like I think like your school particularly has offices that are set up to support you. So like we have a guidance office, essentially a learner experience office. And like how many times I've called those guidance counselors being like, I don't know what to do. And they help you through it. Like they are fantastic. The other side of it is like the dean of equity, diversity, and inclusion for students that are coming from minority backgrounds. You know, as an Indigenous person, I was able to reach out multiple times and be like, look, I think that this is really important. And the next day I got an email being like, you have a meeting with the dean, the vice dean, and this dean, and we're all going to sit down together and talk about why that's so important because I agree. You know, and it's people who like pick you up and help you with those things. The other piece was I found mentors that like knew what I was interested in. So when I connected with them, they connected me with opportunities and things and it goes through them and I'm comfortable with them. So when my mentor reaches out to me and says, Taylor, I have this really cool gig for you. Like, I think you're going to be great at it. And I go, I am floored right now. She goes, all right, don't worry about it. We can do it later. And like, let's put a pause on it. So it's having people that are comfortable with that piece as well. I think that that's really how medical school helps support you. I think for you, you just have to learn how to balance that baseline. I think as a pre-med, you definitely learn how to balance quickly because you guys often are working, volunteering, and in school, which is super demanding school. So I think you're already building those skills at baseline, like having a calendar and stuff like that. Learning how to do taxes.
I just filed my first like set of taxes.
Wow.
So I guess you do like learn. I guess by the time you apply, I think you might have already gotten yourself a little.
You have to develop the skills to succeed in your guys' program.
Basically, kind of got like a holistic review of like how medical school went for you, and we're so glad that you had such a good time and you had such a good experience with medical school, and it was really insightful in learning what you think is important and what things you look for in good applicants. And I think the viewers will also really appreciate you coming on our podcast and sharing your views and your thoughts, and I hope this will be really helpful for everybody.
I hope so too. Yeah, I definitely think like again, you guys are in this like pressure cooker and this kind of echo chamber, and like somebody says a thought out there that's like anxiety inducing, then the whole room's like filled with anxiety. And I just think like at the end of the day, like everyone who wants to be a doctor is going to be a fantastic doctor because they're going to develop the skills in order to become that. And if it takes you 1 try, 2 tries, 5 tries, I've seen people get in on their 5th or 6th try. It happens. And that doesn't make them any worse of a doctor. In fact, I think the people who apply multiple times are our strongest people that are going through.
I think that is all.
So we're going to wrap it up. Thank you guys for listening to our podcast. Thank you so much, Taylor, for coming on. So this is Kanishka.
This is Sugamiya.
And thanks for listening.